This is Dan Dicks here reporting for Press for Truth, and yes, I have been made fully aware that as a white man with exceptional privilege, I am solely responsible for all of the evils that have ever plagued society. And when it comes to environmentalism and climate change in general, it's not the sun driving things, but no, it's my white privilege. And so therefore, we need to pass a bill now that's going to deal with environmental racism. And yes, I am being sarcastic, but unfortunately, no, this is not a joke. Bill C-226 is an act respecting the development of a national strategy to assess, prevent, and address environmental racism and to advance environmental justice. This bill actually already passed the House of Commons in March of 2023, and now it's being considered by the Standing Senate Committee on Energy, the Environment, and Natural Resources. And as we see here in this article by theconversation.com titled, "Meaningful Engagement is the Key to Achieving Bill C-226's Goal of Ending Environmental Racism in Canada," they say, as community-engaged critical policy scholars dedicated to interpreting the entangled mess of colonialism, sexism, and racism in public policy, we have spent more than a decade working alongside and as members of affected communities to better understand community well-being and respond to factors including environmental destruction that undermine well-being. Now, obviously, environmental destruction that undermines well-being is not a good thing. So what do they propose we do about it? The strategy must adopt a broader view of planetary health to understand the complexities of environmental racism. Intersectionality, a term coined in 1989 by American civil rights activist and legal scholar Kimberly Crenshaw, helps us consider how people's identities intersect with systems of power to create patterns of privilege and oppression. As the Native Women's Association of Canada and the Women's Healthy Environments Network noted in their submissions to the Senate Committee, environmental hazards and harms are not experienced equally. It is beyond dispute that factors such as gender, income, and ability structure the benefits and burdens of resource extraction and development. So basically, so-called white privilege is the problem here, and the whole world needs to just be more educated about that. Guys, I've seen this before. Anyone remember this headline from March of 2019? Study finds a race gap in air pollution. Whites largely cause it, blacks and Hispanics breathe it. The air that Americans breathe isn't equal. Blacks and Hispanics disproportionately breathe air that's being polluted by non-Hispanic whites, according to a study. This new research quantifies for the first time the racial gap between who causes air pollution and who breathes it. One guy on Twitter back then debunked this race-baiting nonsense, and USA Today ended up blocking him because of it. As we see here, in response to this pollution from whites disproportionately affects blacks and Hispanics article, he says, meanwhile, back in reality, air pollution by country? Notice anything interesting here? It doesn't seem to be localized to white nations. You've got deforestation by country. Again, an interesting pattern emerges here. You've got ocean pollution by category. You got China is number one, followed by Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam, Sri Lanka, Thailand, Egypt, Malaysia. Notice anything? Yeah, again, not white nations. You guys are race-baiting fake news. And then they went ahead and blocked him after being called out. And he's right. This is a bunch of race-baiting nonsense. But it's not just that. Man-made climate change being a threat to the planet is one of the biggest hoaxes that is being perpetuated on society by the powers that ought not be. And they use celebrities like Leonardo DiCaprio to drive home the idea that you are the problem, and so therefore, you are the one who needs to be controlled as a solution here. So I want to leave you today with a short documentary film that I made way back in 2016, Debunking, a film that was made at the time by Leonardo DiCaprio, titled Before the Flood. My friends, if you appreciate my efforts to bring you this information, please take one moment today to check me out at pressfortruth.ca/donate. You can click that top link in the description below. Alright guys, without any further delay, here's my short documentary film titled Leo's Before the Flood, and the truth about climate change.
The truth is, the more I've learned about this issue and everything that contributes to the problem, the more I realize how much I don't know. How much I don't know about this issue. The first time I ever heard the term global warming, which is what it was called back then, I was in my early 20s.
I had the opportunity to sit down one-on-one with then Vice President Al Gore in the White House.
He drew a picture of our planet on a chalkboard, and then he drew the atmosphere around it. And he said, "This is the most important issue of our time." I had absolutely no idea what he was talking about. He said all our modes of transportation, boats, trains, planes, cars, the way we produce our food, the way we build our cities, almost everything we do releases carbon dioxide, CO2. And that leads to climate change. The polar ice caps will melt, the seas will start to rise, there'll be more dangerous weather patterns, floods, droughts, wildfires. It sounded like some nightmarish science fiction film. Except everything he said is real, and it's happening right now.
Right now, happening right before our very eyes, a religion is forming, not conceived from a god or even from one man, but born from an idea. Leonardo DiCaprio's documentary Before the Flood uses religious symbols and paintings, from the earth at creation to the Garden of Eden and the time before the flood. So while God said he would never flood the world again, Leo is saying, don't listen to him. The god of science has prophesied catastrophic events, and the only way to please her is to make sacrifices. What kind of sacrifices? More taxes, deindustrialization, and a complete disintegration of our civilization by government force. This is a false religion, and Leo is a false prophet. By making this into a religious crusade, the powers that be have appealed to people's emotions, and furthermore, they've hidden the real scam behind climate change. Unveiling this scam starts with asking the question, what happened to our industry? While it's true, economic growth does tend to lead people away from industrial production, and the decline of the US and Canadian manufacturing is due to capital exports, the main reasons are centralized labor unions, regulations on entrepreneurs, education policies, the welfare state, and of course, taxation. A growing economy means capital accumulation. The structure of production changes as investments in technology lower the need for blue-collar labor. Rather than spending long hours at mindless jobs doing the same thing over and over again, in which money is your only reward, a growing economy offers more leisure time and jobs that provide immediate psychological, emotional, or intellectual rewards. So as the economy grows, industry work declines, but this does not necessarily mean declining output or revenues. Capital accumulation and technology provide wealth even with less people working in manufacturing. Think of it like farming. With only a small percentage of society doing the farming, the rest of society is free to concentrate on other things than growing food. Now, what does this have to do with climate change? Well, think about how industry advances, how clean everything gets as the technology improves, and how capitalists reinvest in their equipment. But we don't live in some free market utopia. In the real world, we have crony capitalists working with the state. A lot of these Western capitalists over the last 30 years have been investing their capital into former communist countries in Asia. Instead of investing in Canadian or American industry, these crony capitalists invested in Asia. They built up the economies of the Far East, which, with large populations, means more pollution. Instead of investing in cleaner modes of production over here, crony capitalists took their capital overseas. And then the situation was made worse here by government intervention into the economy. The powers that be looked at the pollution coming out of Asia and said we need to fight climate change by imposing restrictions that impoverish us here in North America. They are also preventing an accumulation of capital, yet it is accumulation that is the basis of our civilization. Capitalism needs capital to work, and that is what cleans up pollution. Private property rights include the right to clean air, or at least the right to contract with a manufacturer how many or what kind of pollutants you are willing to inhale. But we're a long way from that. Welfare diminishes the incentive to accept low-paying industry jobs. Subsidies to secondary education artificially prolong schooling, reducing supply and quality of labor, and at a time when working values should be instilled in young people, where the rules that govern a business are projected instead of the leftist musings of a professor. Post-secondary schools prolong adolescence at a time when young people should be learning the skills to make it in the market. So now there is an artificial bias among working people for scientific, intellectual, and artistic work. They will not settle for less, and adding insult to injury, they consider the lesser work to be dirty and not environmentally friendly. In a strange twist of events, leftists have turned against blue-collar workers. Unless, of course, the work is in something green. And so, in order to fight climate change, we are subjected to a panoply of regulations that increase the cost of doing business. Regulations that feed an army of lawyers, accountants, auditors, financial advisors, and government bureaucrats. And all at the expense of ordinary mom-and-pop small businesses. So-called green central planning cannot save the planet, nor will it bring about sustainable prosperity. And thus, deindustrialization of the West has always been the goal. The powers that be saw the communist experiments of the 20th century as a success, not from the viewpoint of the average citizen, but from the viewpoint of sociopaths who believe in depopulation. Now it's their time to impoverish and enslave humanity in a more efficient manner. One where people do not recognize the chains around their ankles. Where environmental worship is the norm, and where low carbon footprint means being poor, and being poor is considered hip. Where capitalism is the enemy, the devil, and where profit is sin. But this route leads to mass starvation. I hope Leo knows you can't eat an Oscar. Does he realize what he's doing? Or is he a useful tool? Another slow-to-learn celebrity with an inflated ego, brainwashed at a young age in the White House to bring us this so-called truth. The only remedy here is removing the artificial obstacles placed in our way by the state. The only way to clean up the environment and to build the technology that will take us into space is to allow capitalism to work. If we care about the long-term sustainability of this planet and the human race, we must reject statism. Please help us counter this propaganda by liking and sharing this video. And you can support our efforts here at Press for Truth by joining us as a PFT patron. Just $5 a month will help us continue to smash that pyramid one brick at a time.